Hey everyone, this is Billy Carson, also known as Forbidden Knowledge, another great Forbidden Knowledge podcast. I have a phenomenal guest with me today. Dr. Stephen Greer is here. And Dr. Stephen Greer is an American ufologist and retired traumatologist. Dr. Greer founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the Disclosure Project. Dr. Greer has also gone to great lengths to expose classified UFO information. You may have seen some of his work. He's got a few projects out there you probably saw on Amazon Prime and maybe some other locations as well. The Day Before Disclosure, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, Contact Has Begun, Unacknowledged, and many more. So welcome to the podcast, Dr. Greer.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you.
Yeah, man. I'm really looking forward to this. I can really consider you like a high level, person on my show because it's not that other people don't have great information, but the information that you're bringing to the world to me is so important because I really believe that disclosure is the ultimate thing that's going to help to totally free mankind.
Well, that's right. And the reason I left my career as an emergency doctor, it was a few years ago, is because, after I had done the briefings for the Clinton administration and his CIA director, we realized that the entire clandestine operations related to this subject had been run illegally and unconstitutionally. And we found out there were two big reasons for that. The first is technological, that there are technologies that would liberate all of our civilization from what I call the sort of macroeconomic slavery of the zero-sum game of oil, gas, coal, paucity, poverty, etc., and that the technologies that are behind how UFOs operate have been figured out and have been operational since literally before I was born. And so when I discovered that, I said, well, this is a crime against humanity. And then I also realized that the other part of it that was a bit more concerning, believe it or not, was that I was read into or briefed on projects that people had operational that were hoaxing a threat from outer space, and that I learned this in the 90s, almost 30 years ago, and that it's at some point that would go into the mainstream media, and then the government of the United States would lead the way in presenting false evidence that there's a threat from outer space. And you and I have been witnessing this in the mainstream media and comments that are coming out of the government about this quote unquote threat to the national security related to UFOs or UAPs or whatever the faddish term they're using now. Yeah. So that is actually more dangerous than the fact that we're destroying the biosphere by not having these zero point and other technologies released. So I have done briefings for every president since Bill Clinton and have worked on this. I have a team of now about 980 top secret military and corporate folks who give me documents, evidence, what have you. And what I decided is that since the mainstream media, and it's great that you have an alternative media outlet like your show, that they're only going to report what the handlers that they have from the intelligence community tell them to report.
Right.
And with the spin that they are prescribed to spin, i.e., it's got to be scary, it's got to be a threat.
Always a threat, yeah.
And that those two big aspects of the secrecy, you're never going to see in the mainstream news, because the mainstream news media, as you know from constitutional and civil rights attorney Daniel Sheehan, he said that when he was doing the Pentagon Papers, he saw a document that listed 42 of the top national security editors of media in the United States and around the world that were directly on the payroll of the CIA. And that's why you never get the actual real story in the mainstream media. They are actually not free to cover it.
Yeah.
And so it means that people like you and me and others, and luckily now I have a lot of celebrity supporters like Demi Lovato and others who are getting our word out to help get this information to the public and move around the mainstream media that has, to the extent that they're disclosing this at all, your audience needs to understand it's a false disclosure.
Right. Yeah, that's what I've seen. So every time I see these, these releases of documents and classified documents and information and radar images, they always back it up with it's a threat to our national security. It's a threat to our nukes. It's a threat to the war machine. We're dealing with a civilization or civilizations that are so far ahead of us. We could have been destroyed with the snap of a finger, and yet we're still here.
That's right. Yeah, and this is something that, just common sense science. I'm a scientist,
Yeah.
and when I look at the sort of, and by the way, I never call myself a ufologist because I don't think
Okay.
such a thing exists.
Okay.
Is that we deal in a time where people are not engaging in critical thinking. I think you and I talked about this privately on a call. And by that, I mean, what does it mean that there are civilizations visiting us? It means that they have to go beyond the speed of light. It means that their technologies and physics are so advanced that if in fact they were hostile,
Mhm.
it would have been all over the instant we detonated that first atomic weapon at the Trinity site in 1945.
Right.
Because when we detonate atomic and nuclear weapons, it actually tears the fabric of space-time, not linearly, but in a entangled physics way, meaning that it has effects that are beyond the speed of light
Mhm.
and crosses dimensions.
Yeah.
And this is all going to come out in a case that we're working on this big 20-year anniversary of the Disclosure Project. I mean, I don't know if all your listeners know, I'm the father of the global disclosure movement, and what had become a series of private briefing initiatives for the president and members of Congress and the CIA director back in the early 90s,
Yeah.
when we realized that they were not going to do anything to help disclose this issue properly.
Mhm.
We started the Disclosure Project, and in May of 2001, we did the Global Disclosure Project National Press Club event,
Mhm.
which you can see on my YouTube site. It's youtube.com/Dr. Stephen Greer 55, and that's the year I was born, 1955. Getting up there. So what I tell people is that that event was eventually seen by around 1 billion people,
Mhm.
and then got taken down out of the media. The first hour of it was electronically jammed
Yeah.
by the National Security Agency, that the night before my team saw agents on that building putting electronic warfare systems up.
Mm.
That is a true story. And I don't talk about it often, but your audience might understand that that's how that game is played. And so on April 25th of this year, in a couple weeks, we're going to have the 20th anniversary celebration. And we're doing it at a private venue in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Mhm.
And people who want to join us by webinar, I think my wife sent you the link, but you can find out about it, SiriusDisclosure.com. That's my main website, SIRIUS, like the star system, disclosure.com. And SiriusDisclosure.com, you can also sign up, get a free newsletter. Everything on there is free, by the way. And so you can tune into this webinar. And the reason you're going to want to, it's going to be a 5-hour webinar from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday, the 25th of April. And it's going to have the spokesperson for Werner von Braun, who invented the rocket, Adolf Hitler, speaking.
Mm.
We're going to have an interview from a senior U.S. senator who's now retired, his son, who was on the Majority Intelligence Committee dealing with UFOs with George Bush Sr.
Wow.
We're going to have the chief cosmonaut trainer from Russia live from Moscow talking about what they know.
Mhm.
We're going to have a senior retired military general from Russia
Mhm.
acknowledging that the ETs, the extraterrestrial civilizations, are real and that they're not hostile and that we must keep weapons out of space. We're going to have Daniel Sheehan, the renowned civil rights and constitutional attorney who did the Pentagon Papers and has been our advisor for 25 years or so. And we're going to also have a photograph shown for the first time of a humanoid being dissected
Wow.
at a military operation from the 1920s. We have gotten this from the survivor, the child of a woman who was at Roswell, but it was also present at the original atomic bomb blast. And it was in her personal belongings and was found recently. And it is astonishing to see this person, this being, being dissected. And it is 25 years before the Roswell event. And no one in the world, the only people who've seen this photograph, they just gave me permission to release it, have been in the briefing materials I put together for the last president and for this president, Biden. So this is going to be quite an amazing thing for people to see. And then we're also going to have Paula Harris, who has been a dear friend and researcher, associate of mine since the 90s, on a very explosive case that she and I've known about for about 8 or 9 years, that is actually, I think, more significant than the Roswell crash, that she has gathered the evidence. That is going to be disclosed on April 25th of this year on this webinar. So I hope people can join us. That event is a fundraising event also for an emergency documentary that we're trying to create between now and about a month and a half, 2 months from now, to release. That will be a free video that will ask everyone, and we'll give you a copy. You can put it on your site, no charge, because it will be basically an expose of this cosmic threat hoax. And we will actually also be showing at the webinar the models, the 3D models, as well as the diagrams and illustrations of the man-made UFOs that have been used to fake alien events.
Wow.
And this is astonishing stuff. This is the biggest expose we've ever done, because we're basically pulling the curtain back on what the intelligence community calls stagecraft, where they stage events that the people think, oh, that was a, quote, alien craft. And it's actually our classified technologies doing things, including abductions, mutilations, and accidents that have been covered up. One of the things we're going to have in this expose, which most people are astonished, they don't know this. Most people who've studied the subject know of the very famous 1980 near crash landing event called the Cash Landrum case that happened outside Houston. And Betty Cash and other people were sprayed with nuclear material waste that made them, almost killed them. They were severely injured. And it turns out we have an Air Force intelligence officer who was the principal investigator of that accident, who we have on the record. And we also have the court documents from that event that prove that it was now get this is how deep this water goes. It was an extraterrestrial vehicle that we had captured, downed, and they couldn't get the energy system to work. So they rather stupidly put on a nuclear energy device, portable one, that had a malfunction. And this thing was flown out of so-called Area 51, the Nevada test range, and it was headed towards a base in Texas by 4 human, not alien, pilots, each of which were debriefed by this intelligence officer we have on videotape. And that ended up malfunctioning, and there were all these helicopters surrounding it. We actually have a very good illustration of this from eyewitnesses. And as it was descending, it unfortunately sprayed this whole area outside Houston with nuclear waste. That case is also going to be presented as an example of how, even in a court lawsuit for the damages that these poor women suffered, the government said, we don't know what this is, and we had no part in it, and the judge threw it out. But interestingly, this is the nuance. People listen carefully. That the judge and the people called in to testify, honestly, were telling the truth. Because the nature, if you go to Amazon and look at Unacknowledged, it's had 700 million people see it. That documentary, most watched documentary in history, by the way. It's about unacknowledged special access projects. And this means they're so deep black that if you were to bring in the 3-star general in charge of the Defense Intelligence Agency, he could truthfully say under oath that he had no idea this happened.
Right.
That is how secret and compartmented UFO and extraterrestrial projects are. How do I know this? I personally briefed the 3-star general, Patrick Hughes, who was the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency back some years ago, and he was completely denied access to all this information.
Wow.
So when these things happen, people say, well, how could the government's hiding this? I said, no, the illegal government is hiding it. The unconstitutional operations are hiding it. But the government of Joe Biden and most senators, there are a few devils in there who are actually on these covert programs. Most of the military, most of the CIA, I think your audience, Billy, knows more about this subject than they do, honestly.
Yeah.
And that is the nature of the secrecy. It actually is so tightly held that a case like this could go to court and you could go to discovery and you get nothing. This, by the way, is why most FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests result in nothing, because the receiving FOIA officer cannot penetrate an unacknowledged special access project.
Right.
Okay. They're unacknowledged, meaning that nobody outside that project is allowed to know that it even exists.
Yeah.
So this is part of the problem, is that we're talking illegal secrecy. That is not only these guys have an agenda to create this hoaxed threat from outer space.
Yeah.
And a lot of people ask me, when is this false flag happening? I said, it started in 1953. I have a document from the director of the CIA,
Wow.
Smith, at that time, stating that they would use the UFO subject for it, and I'm quoting, its psychological warfare value.
Yeah.
And so began the era of hoaxing UFO events, hoaxing alien events. They become more and more sophisticated. Now you and I and all your audience are living through the era where what Werner von Braun warned about on his deathbed to Carol Rosin, that they would hoax this, and it's all a lie, this threat from outer space. And people say, why would they do that? And interestingly, Luis Elizondo, who was the guy who was with TTSA and all that crowd, he's a master disinformation agent from the Pentagon, by the way. He admitted to Daniel Sheehan recently that they all know that the ETs are not hostile, but there's no way to get funding for the war machine.
That's right.
And for the contractors and the defense industry and grow it by trillions of dollars, unless there's a scary thing from outer space for all of us to fight.
Exactly.
This is what's at stake. When I tell people that I have lived for 30 years watching this rollout, where now it's gone from an outside group like TTSA that was putting out this narrative of an alien threat, now is going straight through the government, out of the government, into the mainstream media, because they are about to pull the trigger on convincing people through fear.
Yeah.
And people think that the damage that's happened to our economy and freedoms from COVID have been bad. Wait for this. So that's why if people want to help us, by the way, everything we do are non-commercial. It's a crowd-funded documentary. You can go to ce5film.com and contribute. We have a goal we need to reach, and I hope we surpass it, because we're putting this out non-commercially, so there's no revenue from the effort, but we want to be able to engage in a big marketing effort just to let people know about it. And then we'll be asking folks like you and Demi Lovato and Danica Patrick and Miley Cyrus, who are big supporters, all of them to put it on their site so that we can reach our goal is to reach 1 billion people with an expose of this hoax, so that if they try to pull it in the next couple of months, they won't, because enough people are going to know it's a trick.
Yeah, well, no,
so what our goal is to show what their trick is.
Yeah, exactly. Expose it, kind of pull their card.
Yes.
Yeah.
Neutralize it.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. That makes absolute sense. And I'm going to post all the links to all your projects underneath the video when it's aired. And also I'll be doing swipe ups in my stories on my social media accounts directly to your CE5 account, your site, your Sirius website. So everybody will be able to get a hold of it. Wherever this video shows up, just look in the caption, look for the links attached to this video. If you're watching this on Apple TV or Amazon Fire TV or Roku, just go to these websites with your mobile device and check them out, and please contribute and please help us out, because we want to get this word out to everybody. Right.
Now, a lot of people say, well, what can I as an individual do? Well, you can help us get the word out. Tell your friends about this webinar on April 25th. We want to have a lot of people in there.
Yeah.
But also, we have a initiative. And if you get on Amazon Prime and the other sites, there's a movie called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And that's when humans make peaceful contact with the ETs directly. And to be honest, that's how I got involved. I mean, my first involvement wasn't disclosure. Disclosure Project happened because we started an initiative using higher states of consciousness and meditation, interfacing and remote viewing ET craft and making contact and inviting them to interact with us, but within the ethical world of peaceful contact, as opposed to materialistically trying to get something from them, or xenophobically, or I call it exo-racism, to be honest with you, trying to view them. And I think, let's talk about this. And you're African American. In high school, I had an African American girlfriend. So much of what has been put out to the public on the ET issue is about this race being good, this one's bad. And you'll always notice the ones that look like they're from Norway are the good ones.
What websites you have, where they can find you, how they can contribute and participate in your efforts for disclosure.
Is a SiriusDisclosure.com, SIRIUS disclosure.com. And I have several hundred videos and about 70 top secret military guys on my YouTube channel. So if you go to my YouTube channel, you can see all that information as well. Thank you very much for your help. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So we'll see you soon, everybody. Again, another great episode of Forbidden Knowledge Podcast. Please share this, show this to everyone, your family, your friends, people who say they want to learn more about, this alternative media. Well, we got a great source here, okay? Forbidden Knowledge TV. Thanks a lot, everyone.